There is a question hiding underneath almost everything sociology studies, and most sociology never asks it. When we talk about society, what exactly are we talking about? A crowd of individuals, a nation, a market, a set of institutions? Alexander Dugin's Ethnos and Society begins by insisting that all of these are latecomers, that beneath every complex society there is a far older and simpler form, and that if you want to understand the complicated thing, you first have to understand the simple thing it grew out of. That simple thing he calls the ethnos. This is a work of theoretical sociology translated into English and published in 2018, and it belongs to a larger project Dugin calls ethno-sociology. The claim at its center is bold to the point of being provocative, that sociology as we normally practice it is really just one branch of a deeper discipline, the study of the ethnos, and not the other way around. What follows is a summary of that argument, chapter by chapter, in the order Dugin builds it, from the simplest human community imaginable up through the nation-state and the fragmented global society we live in now. The aim here is to represent his case fully and fairly so that you understand what he is actually claiming, whatever you decide to make of it. The ethnos for Dugin is the koinem, the atom of social life, the simplest form of society there is. His wager is that if you can describe this atom precisely, you gain a measuring stick for everything more complex. So the book opens by holding the ethnos still and examining its structure from three angles at once. Ethnostatics looks at the ethnos as if it never changed, an idealized frozen type, the way a physicist might describe a frictionless surface that exists nowhere but clarifies everything. Ethnodynamics adds motion, but only the kind of motion that keeps the structure intact, the vibrations and oscillations by which an ethnos works hard to stay exactly what it is. Ethnokinetics, finally, describes the rare and dramatic moment when the structure actually breaks, when the ethnos stops being itself and turns into something else. These three lenses run through the entire book like a spine. What is the ethnos actually like on the inside? Dugin borrows the philosopher Edmund Husserl's idea of intentionality to describe how ethnic thought works. In the ethnos, he argues, there is no clean line between the idea of a thing and the thing itself. The mind does not stand back and ask whether its picture of the world matches the world. It simply lives inside the picture. There is no separate subject over here observing a separate object over there. The ethnos thinks of itself as a seamless whole with no fracture in it. This is not presented as stupidity or primitiveness. It is a different and, in its own way, complete mode of being, one where the human person, the animals, the mountains, the ancestors, and the spirits all belong to a single living order. That wholeness shows up vividly in how the ethnos handles the individual. Drawing on anthropologists like Ruth Benedict, Abram Kardiner, and Levi Strauss, Dugin argues that the simplest societies barely have a concept of the individual at all. A person is a bundle of statuses and roles, a mask, in the old sense of the Greek word for person, which literally meant mask. In the ethnos, everything is a mask, and no one asks who stands behind it, because there is no behind. Status is cosmic. It belongs not only to people, but to plants, animals, spirits, and the dead, all woven into one taxonomy. Totemism, shamanic trance, the ritual masks of the spirit dances. These are the natural expressions of a world where identity is collective, typical and shared, rather than private and unique. This is what it means to say the ethnos denies individual identity. It is not cruelty, it is the shape of a world that has not yet split. The next movement of the book shows how that world holds itself together over time. This is the domain of ethnodynamics, and its most striking illustration comes from the anthropologist Marcel Mauss and what he called the economy of the gift. In archaic economies, Dugin explains, the goal of exchange is not profit. It is balance. Each party should receive exactly as much as he gives. A surplus is as suspect as a loss. He points to the old etymological knot in which words for surplus and excess share a root meaning evil. The most dramatic expression of this is the potlatch, the ritual in which a person of status deliberately destroys his own wealth. Read through Dugin's frame, the potlatch is not mainly a display of power. It is the ethnos violently ridding itself of a dangerous surplus, of the new, which threatens the sacred equilibrium of the whole. An ethnos, in other words, spends enormous energy making sure that nothing ever really changes. This is also where socialization comes in, the elaborate machinery of initiation and gender roles by which the ethnos reproduces itself unchanged across generations. Then something does change, and here the book turns to ethnokinetics, the breaking point. What shatters the seamless whole, in Dugin's account, is the appearance of the other. Inside the static ethnos, even conflict is a kind of game, a ritual, an exchange. Violence circulates within a world where death is just a moment in the cycle of life. But the true other is different. The other is radically not this, something that cannot be absorbed into the whole. With the arrival of the other comes for the first time the possibility of falling out of the cycle forever, of real, irreversible death. And with that possibility comes war in the full sense, and the emergence of the we group set hard against the they group. Dugin borrows Erich Jentsch's term antitype for this mirror-image enemy. He also connects this rupture to Lev Gumilev's theory of passionarity, the surge of energy that ignites ethnogenesis, while carefully renaming it. What Gumilev calls the birth of an ethnos, Dugin calls leogenesis, the birth of the narod out of the ethnos. That word, narod, names the great middle of human history, and the book gives it its longest and most demanding treatment. The narod, Dugin uses the Greek laos alongside it, is the first derivative of the ethnos, no longer the simple koinemi, not yet the modern nation. When the seamless ethnic whole splits, an enormous release of energy follows, and out of it come the things we usually call civilization. The great empires, the world religions, the monumental cultures of antiquity. The narod is where heaven and earth divide, where elite and masses divide, where logos and transcendence appear, where history in the dramatic sense begins. Crucially, Dugin argues that the state is a typical creation of the narod, not of the ethnos, and not originally of the nation. Behind every traditional state, if you look, you can still see the narod that produced it. This is the peak of qualitative intensity in his whole scheme, the most heroic, the most tragic, the most exerted form of human society. From there, the book descends toward the modern world, and the tone shifts. The nation is the second derivative from the ethnos, and it appears only when a traditional state becomes a modern state, a transformation Dugin locates in Europe over roughly the last 400 years. The modern nation-state, he argues, swaps caste and estate for economic class, takes the bourgeoisie as its normative human type, replaces a community of fate with a social contract, and installs the individual citizen as the basic political unit. Ethnic and estate complexity get flattened into the single uniform category of citizenship. Following Benedict Anderson's famous phrase, Dugin calls the nation an imagined community, something the bourgeoisie imagined into being in place of both the old estate order and the rural ethnic world it left behind. The nation is more mechanically complex than the narod, but, in his reckoning, less intense. The heroic, transcendent energy of traditional society gets diffused and diluted across millions of individual citizens. The final movement carries this logic to its endpoint: civil society and global society. If the ethnos is maximally whole, civil society is maximally fragmented, split vertically and horizontally, broken into pieces. Here, the process that began with the nation completes itself. Logos, rationality, the confrontation with death and with the other, all of it is finally delegated to the lone individual, with no collective vessel left to carry it. The individual of civil society is, in principle, totally free and totally responsible. But Dugin argues that his real potency shrinks in exact proportion to that swelling responsibility, because his will is blocked at every turn by the identical will of every other omnipotent individual. His energy is weak. His face, in Dugin's memorable image, is turned toward entropic virtuality, the screens and devices where a frictionless, consequence-free freedom becomes possible precisely because nothing there is fully real. Global society is this same fragmentation extended across the whole planet. the ethnos dissolve to the point where its warmth and wholeness survive only as absence. Taken as a whole, ethnos and society is a single long argument that runs downhill. From the seamless, sacred wholeness of the ethnos, through the tragic grandeur of the Nerod, through the leveling of the nation, to the fragmented individual of global civil society. Dugin presents this not as decline exactly, but as differentiation, a series of splits, each one buying complexity at the price of wholeness, energy, and depth. The book is genuinely learned. It moves with ease across Husserl and Heidegger, Mauss and Levi-Strauss, Gumilev and Weber, and it takes seriously questions that a great deal of modern social science simply steps around. What a person is, what a community is, what is lost when the two come apart. And it is worth reading with your eyes open. The framework has a strong pull toward treating the ethnos as the true measure of everything human, and the modern individual as a kind of thinning out, a fall from fullness. There is something real being pointed at here. The modern person often is lonelier, more abstract, more cut off from any living whole than his ancestors were, and a sociology that cannot even see that loss is impoverished. But the same framework can flatten the individual person in the other direction, treating him mainly as a moment in a collective structure, a mask with no one behind it, a derivative of the ethnos rather than someone of infinite and irreducible worth in himself. The wholeness worth wanting is not the wholeness of a crowd that has never yet learned to say I. A person is not most fully himself when he dissolves back into the tribe, and a community is not most fully itself when it swallows its members. The deepest belonging is the kind that makes persons more themselves, not less, communion, not fusion. Read Dugin for the sharpness of his questions and the reach of his learning. Hold on to the person he is always in danger of dissolving. Ethnos and Society rewards a careful reading precisely because it forces these questions into the open. Whether or not you accept where Dugin lands, he makes you reckon with what modern life has quietly traded away, and that is worth the full book.